Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. I want to interrupt our normal musical interlude here at the beginning of the show. This show is a spontaneous live show with James Horak and Mhairead MacDonald. We're just having a conversation this afternoon on Skype, and it was so fascinating. I wanted to share it with my listeners. So, James, if you remember your thread of thought there, I don't know how much of this you want to carry over into the live show, and I'll just let you guys decide. We've been talking about a whole lot of different topics this afternoon. EBEs, the EMVs, historical trends, some of the weird stuff that goes on in the alternative community, especially with radio shows and whatnot. So if you guys want to pick up anywhere in there, that's fine and dandy with me. Do you guys want to start with the EBEs and then kind of go from there?
Yeah, well, I was trying to explain to Mark, which is why he decided he was going to phone you, James, and then record the conversation. In that sort of, I'll never phone you again on Skype.
Sorry,
That's it. It's over.
Me and Mhairead have been talking for an hour and a half already. It's so crazy.
So, yeah.
That's an issue. I mean, seriously, it is. These conversations, they get so interesting, and you literally can't pull yourself away from them sometimes.
Well, it's like we were saying earlier, because in the kind of normal world where you go about your business and you talk to people about the weather, and there might be some people you can say to about the weather being heavily manipulated or whatever. There's other people that wouldn't have a clue. So I feel like I censor myself so much all the time. Much more so than even 6 months ago. It's really difficult. I really talk to people. You can't get enough of it. You have to get everything out and explore and question. And
what I'm looking forward to now, because we're about to enter into the collapse, in my opinion, and it may be a slow motion collapse, but I'm really interested to see what my colleagues at work see how their mindset changes and how they look at the world different. I'm already hearing people talk about, this, that, and the other thing with a different world, a different view, and they're saying things like, well, maybe those conspiracy theorists aren't so crazy and things like that. I don't know if you guys are hearing any of that, but when this house of cards topples, which I think it's going to topple real soon, people are going to have to wake up to a certain degree. The lady that was cutting my hair this morning, she was so fascinated, everything I was telling her about the Federal Reserve. And the one thing that I brought up was, my theory is, I want to run this past you guys, is that our Constitution was and has been suspended since at least 1933, when FDR confiscated the gold from the people under the guidance of the Federal Reserve. And they, under the Emergency Powers Act, suspended the Constitution of the United States. And I think it's been suspended since then. And people like Obama, with all his executive orders, can get away with murder now because of that. Let me throw that out, see what you guys say, but the conversation can go anywhere at once. I just throw that out to start out with.
Well, the Constitution is the only social contract that the people of this nation have with their government. And FDR was able to invoke the emergency acts because of the Depression and the fact that the policies of Harding and other presidents had been so catastrophic in creating social unrest. There was even a high-level conspiracy to overthrow FDR, which has come to light in recent years. So there were a lot of people that considered him having extra terms, him being able to create a gold reclamation act out of thin air, and at the same time close all the banks and allow agents of the government in the name of the IRS, which he created at about the same time, to go in and loot everyone's safe deposit box of all the gold. They took things that were not under the Gold Reclamation Act, and this Gold Reclamation Act stayed in force for 40 years, from 1934 to 1974, when it was revoked by Gerald Ford.
It was in act that long, James? I had no idea.
Yes. Every year there were so many dentists that were indicted for speculating in gold simply because they bought too much gold foil filling. There was people that were going to prison for 20 years because they smelted their own gold. You had to have a Class 3 gold license to do that, you see. And this was all occurring in a nation that touted itself the freest on earth.
You know, in light of that, James, it gives a clear context for what's going on with Obama now. If FDR got away with that back then, well, now I can see why Obama...
Well, the Constitution is not a matter of personal volition or trend. These monsters swear an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution on assuming office. And this is done in the military as well. So it's not a matter of, well, we'll pick and choose. It's a matter that they are guilty of treason for any of 50 things that President Obama has done. He's guilty of treason. And not just treason, but high treason. And that's not to say that other presidents have not done the same, but he's been on a fast track to undermine the Constitution up until Obama. Most of these social engineers and facilitators of New World Order agendas that have been in public office have resorted to a policy of gradualism, and that's their own word for it. And this comes out of CF4 and the Trilateral Commission both that plotted this thing out. So Obama gets in there, and because he's black, and because he was preceded by 2 terms of a Republican administration, that he can now say, well, I'm going to rectify what their mishaps and their misjudgment and everything, Mr. Change. Well, yeah, he's changed things for the worst. He's gone on the fast track and gotten away with it, more because he's black than anything else. That's the only thing that can account for it. The Constitution justifies the standing of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's job is to rule on the constitutionality of any action, whether it's been passed or ratified, as long as it is in any way state, local, or federal levels been put into any kind of implementation. And its ruling will determine whether that particular action is rescinded or, repairs are made to injured parties or what. But you see, the Constitution is packed with idiots and moral imbeciles. The last one that was confirmed, the Supreme Court, Sotomayor, is an absolute racist who has said publicly that all white men should be castrated. You think this person is possible of being a constitutional scholar?
Wow.
Huh? I mean, one-track agenda. But this is the element of what has come about. And the last time that I was offered membership in the Illuminati, which I've been offered several times, they sent me a picture of the Supreme Seven, who are the 7 members of the Supreme Court that are Illuminati. It says it all, doesn't it?
Wow, James, you were offered to join, huh?
Yeah. I got the emails.
When was this? What time frame?
Last year.
That soon? That recent?
Well, I've been made this offer 3 times. 2 times I can say, prior to that one, 2 times I can say it was through people. This time it was through emails, which I kept. I got them.
Mhairead, have you heard this before?
Yes, I've heard this before. I haven't been asked to join. I'm quite disappointed.
Yeah.
That's because you're Scottish. They know that those Scottish people are resolute, or I should say irresolute individualists.
Well, I don't know. There's some very keen Masonic members in this part of the world.
Yeah, but
Scottish Rite and whatnot.
Yeah, but they sold themselves out to the English a long time ago.
What would it mean if you joined? I mean, what would you gain from that?
Well, I would. They flat offered me $20,000 to join.
Okay.
That's not very much, to sell yourself out. I know that one of the people that tried to get me to join before then had an honorary membership in the Illuminati, was given more than that. But he was dying at the time and showed me his certificate of his award.
So they actually give out a certificate. How many people do you think are officially part of the quote-unquote elite? Or
2 million.
2 million, that many.
Yeah. This is from Svali. Svali left the Illuminati under the protection of born-again Christians and then let it all out and made a series of tapes, a number of tapes on what they do. And she was high level. She was a programmer. They program each other, and the Scientologists adapted that too.
So is Scientology part of the Illuminati?
It models itself after the Illuminati, yes. Now, whether I'm sure there are affiliations in context of some task that they want to do or something, they aren't enemies by any means. They're not going to blow the whistle on each other. Just how devious Scientology is, let me give you an example. Do you remember the Waco Siege?
Yeah.
That Khan had a large part in vilifying David Koresh and the individual, Cult Awareness Network, and the individual who was doing all of this, bad-mouthing Koresh, and what they were doing is trying to identify him. It was guilt by association with the former leader, Roden, who was nothing but a plant. When Koresh took it over, he was sincere. He was a biblical scholar and very warm. He was not a cult leader or anything like that, well liked by the people, the community in Waco. And there was no reason for the raid whatsoever. No legitimate reason, I should say. Well, two groups fell in with trying to vilify Koresh to try and justify what went on that first day of the siege, the assault. And one was this individual who was in charge of the Cult Awareness Network in the United States and the Southern Poverty Legal Center, which is nothing but an FBI front.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they are. And so they did everything. They lied. They misrepresented, tried to use guilt by association to defame Koresh as much as they could to make what the ATF had done less than criminal. And, of course, it was a criminal. They attacked. They shot first. They wounded Koresh when he came out of the door to say, look, we have women and children here, and they shot him.
Wow.
He gets pulled back inside. Now, I've got a videotape of this. They claim they lost. I've got it. So if you ever want it, if you will show it, I'll send it to you. There's quite a story about how I came by that, too.
So David Koresh wasn't the bad guy they painted?
No. In fact, quite the opposite.
Really?
And, if you ever want to know more about him, the FBI had a plant in there by the name of David Thibodeau, and he's the only individual that survived after the fire started. And David Thibodeau was in, and Koresh knew that he was an FBI operative and accepted him. Of course, Thibodeau didn't know what they intended to do. And he was so moved by it that he started going with relatives of these members of the Branch Davidians and telling what he knew about it. I was at one of these meetings where these people showed up, and I approached David Thibodeau, and I asked him some questions. I said, what about the tunnels, David? And he said, you know about the tunnels? And I said, I know, that's what got him killed. And he nodded and went on, because he didn't. he wanted to stay alive.
Can we come back to this? I'm going to take this. I'd like to take us on a slightly different path, just because I have some other questions I wanted to get your thoughts on. There's this billionaire, and I bet you know something about this. Maybe you don't, and if you don't, that's okay. There's a billionaire. His name is Elon Musk, and he owns Tesla Motors, and I think he's worth about $12 billion now. He's only 43 years old, and he is claiming that they're working on sending people to Mars with his SpaceX program. Have you done any research into this, James?
Well, they have had bases on Mars, and they've had bases on the Moon, but they didn't get there on a rocket. They got there on EB craft. And there's no way his program wouldn't be feasible unless they can make the metal that'll protect them from the cosmic bombardment, the material that has been caught in the Van Allen belt, and various other problems. If they had the metal, Tesla technology could easily do it. Tesla technology would allow a number of things, but you see that without that metal, none of this is feasible. Of course, he ought to know that.
So is this a scam?
Without that metal, it is a scam, because nothing is going to work without the ability to shield the people that are inside these craft from that cosmic bombardment.
And I think Obama's even been out to Elon Musk's Falcon 9 launch site or whatever.
Well, let me tell you what I think is going on.
Okay, good, yeah.
The elite are despised as much by people that they depend on to facilitate their programs as they are by us. And they may have sold a bill of goods to the elite that they have a place to run off planet, because they are beginning to figure out that these underground bases are not safe because of them having destabilized the crust of the Earth so much. And maybe they've also figured out that the only thing that's holding the crust together right now is the EMV operation I talk about in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they figured that out too. But not the elite. The elite are being spoon-fed by the people that they trust. Imagine that. Scientists wouldn't lie to them, would they? Yeah, you bet. If you ever want to see how distorted the think tank people are that are in CFR and Westinghouse and Tavistock and the Trilateral Commission, then read Iron Mountain, report from Iron Mountain. Now, they'll deny that that's legitimate. They have made up all kinds of stories about that, but just read it. You'll see that in retrospect it's a nail on the head. But you'll also see that the flaws in it have only been dressed up. They haven't been corrected, the flaws in the thinking, and that many of the things it discusses are still being touted as practicable when, in fact, they're not. You know, due to things that have developed, like Fukushima, like the way they have destabilized the Gulf of Mexico and what's underneath 4 states, the salt batholith. When you really get into details, you know, I compare the elite that is so deluded in being secure in their mindset to people that have painted themselves in the corner, in the kitchen. And the only way they have of coping with it is turning on all the gas jets in the kitchen and lighting a match. And that is exactly what they're doing.
So are you saying that this whole colonization of Mars by Elon Musk is going to be a hoax, just like the moon landings?
Yeah. Yeah, it is to placate and assure the elite that are financing everything, well, it's all going to work out. We have provisions, you know, give us some more money so that we can do this or we can do that. It's always been that. I mean, you placate these monsters and you get whatever you want. And, of course, the military-industrial complex does more of that than anybody. They sold them a bill of goods. They told them that they could be safe no matter what they do, and that's not true.
Mhairead, what do you think of all this?
I agree with it, because if they could get off the planet, do you not think they would have done it by now?
Well, what's...
As well, I mean, I'm just sort of throwing that out there, but no, I mean, it's the way that the mindset that they have is completely out of control. And it's like we were saying earlier about the sort of environmental disasters. It's all very well saying the world is a wonderful place, it has the potential to be a wonderful place. Of course, I totally agree with that. It's a beautiful planet. But they're systematically destroying all the systems that are in nature to uphold and support life. You know, they weaponize it against us. You know, the food we eat, the air we breathe, the water we drink, everything now is compromised to such an extent that even countries that it would have been unheard of that, you know, could not support any life at all, we start to feel the stretch, we start to feel the pinch. So that side of it, you take into that equation, and in order to understand, but you can never really understand that psychopathy without being a bit of a psychopath yourself, you know? You see what I mean? You just can't, I can't get into that.
I agree with you completely, Mhairead.
You know? So it's like, because I read stuff, a lot of stuff on the internet, and I do my very best to get my head around that. For example, with Fukushima, the stuff they've covered up, the stuff that's coming out now that we kind of suspected was the case, that's coming out in E&E news and mainstream news. So it's a confirmation of our worst fears, you know. And even now, even still, this part of me that thinks, but this can't be the case. But it is the case. That is how bad they've allowed that situation to get. So, you know what I mean? It's that whole Dr. Strangelove thing. You feel like you're in a really, really crazy, insane film that's scripted by a bunch of maniacs who are saying, well, don't worry, we can take you to Mars, you know? It'll be fine. And it's not. It's not possible.
You know what I'd like to do now? Talk about Dr. Strangelove. This is the fires that are occurring in Oregon. I have a short clip, and I'm going to play this, how they're having evacuations in Oregon, and then I'd like to hear what you say about that and how it kind of fits into our conversation here.
Western wildfires are threatening homes in at least 2 states. Residents of more than 200 homes east of Portland, Oregon, were told to evacuate as a fire spreads in the Columbia River Gorge. Firefighters say strong wind gusts are threatening to spread the flames. Firefighters in central Washington state's Snag Canyon are also keeping a close eye on the weather as they battle a fire that's burned more than 6,000 acres.
The people that are in charge of this fire have spotters everywhere, and they take weather fairly often, so we'll be aware if we have a big wind change.
More than 450 firefighters are battling that blaze, which is chewing its way through grass, brush, and timber. It's also destroyed at least 8 homes. A separate complex of 3 wildfires is threatening more homes in northeastern Washington state. As of Wednesday night, the fires had burned about 7,000 acres in an Indian reservation. Residents of more than 24 homes were told to evacuate, while hundreds of firefighters and multiple aircraft tried to put out the flames.
We had super scoopers out here, the CL-215s, and large and small helicopters.
It's believed lightning started those fires. Sandy Kozel, The Associated Press.
We've got crisis after crisis after crisis in Toledo, which is a couple hours away from here. There were 1 million people without drinking water for I don't know how many days. I lost track of it all. It's Dr. Strangelove. It really is. One thing after another. James, you've talked about these fires before. I'd like to hear your take on it, too.
There are all kinds of prevention methodologies that could have prevented $1 million homes from going up in blaze in California and along other areas of the West Pacific coast. What's sad about it is that in many cases, people that could develop fire breaks or personnel that could go out even after the fire had started and do fire breaks. You know, Aborigines in Africa do this all the time. They can stop a fire reaching inhabited areas in homes, and they never do. They never do. I remember one year that they had, something in the vicinity of 75 very expensive homes up in the mountains, all burned because they wouldn't let them build a fire break because of some little rodent that they were afraid was on near extinction. Of course, building that fire break would save that habitat just as much as not building it.
Yeah.
But that's your government out of control. And California has been famous for electing policymakers into government that are the biggest idiots. They publish a book on something usually that has nothing to do with the expertise they're to practice under their authority, and then they dream up BS like this. Is it part of the social engineering program? It could be. It could be because, the more you stir the pot, the more confused, excited, and hysterical people become. And that makes them easier to control. But when you get into this kind of thing, you don't want to make definite statements because we are trying to win over people that are on the verge of seeing that there are conspiracies and that these conspiracies amount to threats on their survival. So in lieu of that, we want to, walk carefully and carry a big stick like Teddy Roosevelt always talked about. Of course, he didn't need a big stick. But the regard for human life does not enter into any agency or government motivation anymore. And this is what people have to understand. And that's why at the end of all my posts, whether it's on our blog or whether it's on my wall, I sign off with my initials, and then I put the word in capital letters, revolt. Because unless we overthrow these monsters that are driving everybody to destruction and annihilation, we're not going to survive. And we can do it. We can do it. We can put the brakes on. And it begins with the corporate world. The corporate world is the feeding trough of the elite.
Mm-hmm.
And if you start, like, for instance, what would I suggest? Stop buying in Walmart. Stop dealing with AT&T. Pull your bank accounts and put them in little friendly banks. Do whatever you have to do to shake these monsters up.
Let me throw this out at you, too. I mean, I was reading the other day that there are now 100 athletes that have contracts for over $100 million. I mean, I think there's 100 million people in the U.S. on a government assistance right now. So how can you, that's, what's going on is just so mind-boggling and ridiculous.
Well, it's a glorification. When you stop and think about it, they have brought these people up into the corporate world and rewarded them with pats on the head of hundreds of millions of dollars, which is a pat on the head as far as the elite are concerned, for never saying anything, because these sports figures have the ear of the world. There are kids that look up to them. There are even men that worship them.
Yeah.
Seriously. I know some.
It's a strange mindset, though, because...
Yeah, well, they have to make sure they're not going to say anything like, we need to be concerned about Fukushima.
Yeah, right.
Really? Really? Well, remember back when, even as late as the 60s, that there were people, public celebrities, that would do things like that. We haven't had any of those except Charlie Sheen, who has questioned the official findings of the World Trade Center Commission.
Yeah.
He's the only one. They got him, didn't they?
He
lost
did.
his show.
Yeah.
He was made a laughing stock by everybody. Even his close friends fell in line with that. And, of course, he took it on the chin because I like Charlie Sheen. I don't know him personally. I have never written to him or anything, but I think a lot of him.
What was his show, 2.5 Men? I love that show.
That was the most popular series on television, period, hands down.
Really?
People are still watching reruns.
I got the DVDs for that show.
Yeah, I know. I love it. There's some of those things I can't see enough. They're just laugh.
Mhairead, have you ever seen that show?
No, I don't think I have, no.
It's really funny.
I used to be a big fan of his dad, though.
Oh, yeah. Well, his dad supports him. Everybody in that family is an individualist. Some of them won't even take the Sheen name because they want to strike out on their own. They are tired of seeing stars representing these actors' dynasties.
Well, when Charlie Sheen's show went off, that's about the time I stopped watching TV. I was telling Mhairead earlier that I think for the past 2 years I haven't watched TV at all. But you said you watch it sometimes, don't you, Mhairead?
Yeah, well, I watch on a computer. You know, I'll watch a film or I'll watch a series. Like Breaking Bad just had me completely addicted. Like, because I had the whole kind of one series and then you watch one and then you watch two and another. But I'll have a fix. It's like I'll have a fix of watching things and then I get back into looking at reality, because I think you have to balance everything out, because I could sit and read and try and learn as much as I possibly could about the nuclear power industry and still not know everything, which I was trying to do initially in order to understand how something like Fukushima could happen. And I realized it was a bit like learning to play the piano and wanting to play Rachmaninoff No. 2 in a week.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to say this. Mhairead, I know you're not a physicist, but what good is all the knowledge in the world about your specialty or profession or career if you're going to lie about it?
Yeah. And that's why I've supported the grassroots activists that I've come across on the internet, like Kevin Blanche and Christina Consola, and
wonderful
also
people.
And Lorraine Mhairead, who's more than just grassroots. I mean, she's kind of really fantastic. So people like that have informed me beyond, any book.
Well,
and it does the thing. It's like we were talking earlier about researching. To get back onto the whole alternative media, because what happens is, like we're talking about, we stop watching television, but we need to find out about the things like we're discussing now. So we turn to the alternative media. And I was thinking about this the other day. It's 2014 now. It's been about 7 or 8 years where I've really focused on the UFO slant, for example. And my first port of call was Project Camelot, okay, which I wouldn't touch now because I've gone beyond that. I've understood that a lot of that is just respinning the same old. And that's the problem, is that a lot of people will not. They'll hear what they want to hear. They'll hear their kind of reassuring words that they need from, say, the UFO community, because the UFO community will not branch out into world politics or global politics. They might not challenge the elite. They might not even say anything about Fukushima within that context. You see what I mean?
Yeah, what I was bringing up earlier about Fukushima, my little fantasy, you were trying to bring me back to reality, Mhairead, but my little fantasy is maybe these cores have melted down far enough now where, that in the water has kind of contained them, and maybe the radiation is somehow contained. I guess that's pretty much of a dream, isn't it, James?
It's a dream.
Well, we don't even know how far these cores are down.
They've hit the mantle.
They have.
3 have hit the mantle.
3 have hit the mantle.
Yeah.
And the mantle is that part of the Earth where the tectonic plates are?
No, the tectonic plates are much further up, but they ride on the mantle in a way.
Oh, so they've gone. These cores you're saying have melted completely through the tectonic plates.
Yeah, sure they have. Tectonic plates are not that thick.
What's the name of the thing that's near the core? They call it, is the anosphere or anosphere? What's that called?
Well, that is a belief. It's kind of like a legend that there is living spaces. But the mantle generates a magnetic field with respect to the core as it's driven by the moon. And this creates the complex gases that make up our atmosphere and support life, creates a magnetosphere, an ionosphere for shielding Earth, not just bombardment from the sun, but other stars. That's when you're really talking about the totality of what's out there hitting the Earth. You have to talk about cosmic bombardment, not just solar activity. And this is coming in and being gathered at the edge and creates what we call a Van Allen belt. And now I compare it to the grill of a car with bugs stuck in it. And that's what we have with the Van Allen belt. And to go through it is very dangerous because this concentration of probably even hot particles now that Fukushima has been so active.
Let me ask you a question, James. How far down is the mantle, roughly?
It varies.
I mean, are we talking a mile down, 10 miles?
No, 3,500. Probably, I would say about an average of 3,500 miles.
So 3,500 miles in total size for the mantle, or 35?
No, that's the distance from the sea level to the mantle at the thinnest part of the crust.
So how far down in miles do you think these cores are now?
I've gone all the way.
When you say all the way, how many miles deep is that?
Over 3,000 miles.
Holy crap.
Well, you're almost 4 years. They went critical that first day. And so they're gathering mass. Well, one of them began gathering mass. They're not that far apart. So now they're creating a problem because the astrophysics that you've been brought up and told about all your life, and that most people have been educated to believe is gospel, is all BS. It's based on mythology. We know that the moon is older than any body in this solar system. So where did it come from? And it did not originate here, obviously. I have an explanation for that, but it's long-winded. But the moon wants to either go in or go out, and there's constant struggle. Something is working to keep the moon in orbit around the Earth, and it has to be almost a constant adjustment to either keep the moon from going too far out or keep the moon from going too far in. In compliance with this, astrophysics has determined that there are magnetic flux fields and gravitational fields that are changing constantly in accordance with the same changes on Earth. So we know something's going on, something mechanical, something artificial. And since, as I assert, that this is maintained by engines in the Earth and machines on the moon. Be that as it may, this disturbance that this is going to create on the mantle, since these engines are operating through this flux field created in part by sapping off some of that energy from the mantle to help keep that moon in place, in orbit rather, that disturbance, it's just a matter of time that we feel that. Again, this operation in Utah is slowing that process down, but I don't see any purpose in maintaining this situation if this culture is going to self-destruct. Is going to come to a point, which I've stated before, the Earth will be a place in which no one will want to live.
Well, I've got a few questions. This information that you're getting about these cores and how deep they are in the Earth, and you're saying they're maybe 1,000, 2,000 miles deep?
Oh, further than that, at least 3,000.
Is that a calculation you're making? Or are you getting... Okay. Now, isn't there a transition zone between the lower and upper mantle that has a lot of water in it?
Well, they found areas, but it's not continuous or contiguous in any way. Mm-hmm. There are vast reservoirs of oil that they don't know about because their way of prospecting is to use PNS waves that they generate from nuclear blasts beneath the Earth or from what they call nuclear blasts. Of course, maybe they're using that much TNT, but it will not go all the way down. The use of oil, and it's not a fossil fuel, the use of oil is to cushion the crust, to cushion the components down from the crust to the mantle, to preserve the stability of the Earth is a planet for complex life. This is all engineered. There isn't anything's accidental. Science would have you believe that in the infinite billions and billions of planets and time and all that, these things just come about. They can't explain why a moon, a planet, or a star are round. They can't explain a flipping thing, but they want you to know that there's no God that could have done it. There's no great designer that could have done it, because that would mean there's someone that we could never compete with. It is all egotism.
You've talked about the EMVs that play a role in creating solar systems. Is there a superintelligence behind the EMVs?
I don't know. I know what I know about the EMVs, and I'm associated with them. But as far as what's behind them, what created them, and me, I don't know. I'm no closer. I say this over and over again, Mark. I'm no closer to the face of God than you. There is a great balancing act between knowledge that's permitted and the awe of wonder. And there's a reason for that, because we are such, me included, we are such corruptible creatures that we need to have someone that can put us in the corner when we need to be put there. And this goes for ETs, this goes for everybody. And the wonder that our EMVs does it for ETs and extended communities of ETs, it keeps what gain that complex life and its sentience makes. It keeps it there. You get past a certain point and you've got it made. There's no hunger. There is no evil and pursuit of weapons, madness. That's gone, because that has to come about or you'll self-destruct. When you get star travel, the basis of star travel in your hand, you have the ability to destroy a planet in your hand. So if you still maintain aberrancy, either collective or individual, you're going to self-destruct. It's inevitable. So you get to a point, and I call it getting over the hump, where all of this is behind you, or you don't survive. We are at the point where we either get over the hump or we self-destruct. And it's not looking good, Mark.
I know, you said that before. You were talking about star travel there, and the thought that entered my mind was that there's a very, very high technology. I don't know if you've ever even talked about it before. When you said power to destroy a planet, that makes me think that there's maybe a way to get from star to star that conquers time, and where time is no longer a factor.
Back when the second year that I had come out and done shows with Kevin Smith, there were some images coming out, and this was only by virtue of the fact that SOHO was feeding raw data to other space agencies, so that the conspiracy between them hadn't come about. They hadn't sewn it up. So we were seeing this structure that was even in a proportion to the sun, right off the sun. So Kevin said, "What do you know about that?" And I said, I said, "Well, that's for portage." And he says, "What do you mean portage?" I mean, so that we're on the outskirts of the Milky Way. And we're in a perfect place for people that are going beyond this galaxy to have this structure. And he said, "Well, what do you call that?" And I said, "Well, I was pressed for a name by a friend of mine who does our videos works and does an excellent job, a German, to name it." And so I just popped in my head, I called it the solar anvil. But that's what that's for. And Shuni, my German friend, started capturing. They had set up a series of programs where they were actually taking an image every hour with SOHO. And Shuni was keeping up with those. And in one of them, he found these two colossal cylindrical craft coming through the solar anvil and shooting off the parts unknown. A picture's worth 1,000 words, and there was one right there.
Let me ask you, James, is solar anvil a means to jump from star to star with?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's kind of a hyperspace scenario.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and it's not transmission of matter. Now, that's another thing. But people talk about hyperdimensionalism, and the people talk about quantitative analysis and so forth. Quantitative analysis is a method. You know, hyperdimensionalism is limited in aspect to one particular thing. But these terms become almost catchwords, catchphrases. And we have quantum mechanics, a catchphrase. I mean, they're not explicit. They don't define the mechanism involved, but people throw them out like they said something. And if they're not explicit with some point to make with them, they're catchphrases. That's all. I mean, it's a kind of bombastic use of language.
Well, let me throw another question in. Nassim Haramein talks about the sun being a gateway that these ships jump through. What are your thoughts on Nassim Haramein?
Well, he's right. I mean, if he's talking about the anvil, which is the fixture of the sun, and it was built. It was designed and it was built. And your ancestors are trying to do this in their own system, and that's what happened to their system because they were very independent. They wouldn't join an extended community, and so their whole system, which was binary, went poof. Yeah. And you're lucky that you had colonists on the way to a 300-light-year expedition to settle deep space, or there wouldn't be any of you guys around.
So who built the solar anvil in our system?
I don't know. Maybe it was whoever. All I can say about this solar anvil in this system is that it's probably a product of a very, very old extended community that is now non-extant.
Wow. I mean,
and here's something that I talk about occasionally, and I know of two cases where this has happened. There are people that don't want to die. They value their culture. It's reached such a height that they all want to go together. They want to maintain it. So they find a way to rid themselves of the mortal coil and go as a collective. And I call this spiritual technology. Where they go, I don't know. I think sometimes that there's a group in the sun, in your sun. I suspect that's where they go, because to maintain that type of community requires energy. And, of course, nothing has energy like a star.
What did Kevin Smith see when he was at your house?
He saw planes that would freeze in the sky going straight down. He saw large UFOs come down and then go back up very quickly. I took him out to where I'd pointed out this minister that is the front for Air America here in Fort Worth. I took him out to where he has his place and showed him where there were anomaly, because it's right on the edge of a vortex that's been created. And that has something to do with those planes that will freeze in the sky going straight down. I explained to him where I'd seen Mothman, and I said, "Would you like to see a Mothman, Kevin?" And Kevin declined that one. He said no. No. But I couldn't guarantee him that any specific night we went out there that he'd see a Mothman, but I could come pretty close. I could say with 40% probability. And if we did it every night for a week, yeah, you would see a Mothman.
Can you tell us the approximate date of your last incarnation?
I don't incarnate.
Okay, maybe I put this wrong. Can you tell us the rough time on Earth during your last, for lack of a better word, your last lifetime here?
The last time I played a physical role being here on Earth?
Yeah.
I've been around. I didn't take any part in anything, and just to see what was going on. The last time I took a part in anything was in the 1600s.
Okay, that's good. That's a good answer. It's very interesting. But even prior to that, weren't you here during the last age, the last great
yes, last
destruction?
extinction. Yeah.
Can you give us a rough date on that?
37,000 years ago.
That far back.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Was that the time that we would call Atlantis and Lemuria?
You're really asking a lot of me. That was a time when you had actually more people on the earth than there are now. The Amazon basin is where most of the food produced for them was. And as you go deep in the Amazon basin, you see these plots of land that are built up with the canal trenches dug in between them, and they're like tens of thousands of them. Of course, I think the Atlantean myths originate from what happened. But, of course, Atlantis wasn't confined to an island.
Right.
The culture came to loggerheads again with technology, and they created what's called a singularity. You know, if they keep jacking around with a Hadron Collider, they might do it again.
So back 37,000 years ago, when we destroyed ourselves last time, you're saying we created a singularity. Was it like a black hole?
Well, now, I don't like the concept of a black hole as it's portrayed. There are people that view a black hole like a vortex, sucks everything in.
Mm-hmm.
No, it was more like something that reversed the polarity of the way in which cell membranes specialize. And people just died.
So we kind of instantly killed all the life on the planet, or all the human life?
Most of the mammalian life, yes.
Boom, poof. Just it was kind of was it an energy weapon type thing?
Well,
maybe weapon isn't the right word. It was an accident, right?
There's some things you just don't do. And one of the things is to tamper with technologies that have no good use, just to find out how bad something can be.
Oh.
You know, like taking a neutron bomb and detonating it to see how bad that could be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to let Fukushima go on without doing anything about it to see how bad it could be.
So, let me come back to this Mothman thing. You've seen Mothman there in Texas, and can you tell us what he looks like?
Exactly like they are portrayed. The adults are fascinating. They kind of look like the old telling of the devil, only they're black, they're winged, have an extended chin, a very statuesque countenance, and they're tall, about 8 feet, very powerful. And they're not fully manifested in the third dimension, so that you see them and then you don't see them, and you see them and you don't see them. It's kind of like the way one of these old crystal radios used to function back for people that couldn't afford the $30 to buy a good radio.
Mm-hmm.
These little crystal receivers that would constantly have static, and they'd be off and on, off and on, off and on.
Mm-hmm.
But when you begin talking with or speaking or dealing with one of these, they sort of bring you into where they are and where you can communicate with them, and you don't have all this trouble. But they are here for a specific purpose. And then the other variety are the young ones, the little ones, and they look like, have you ever seen a kinkajou?
No.
Kinkajou is a monkey-like little guy. He's a marsupial, has a face like a person.
Oh, yes, I have seen those.
That's what they look like, only they're winged, and they eat carrion. My last ex-wife saw one with me when we were coming in. I used to live out there in this area, and we were coming in. I was moving from there. She was helping me, and it was about 2 o'clock in the morning. We were driving down this road, and there was one eating carrion in the road. She could see the red eyes, the light would hit it, and the eyes are red. And she said, "What is that?" I said, "Oh, nothing." It flew off. And they have a tail like a monkey. So, you know, it's, I mean, they're portrayed. They build costumes for Halloween of these guys, and that's exactly what they look like. Where they come from, the young are very mischievous. They don't have the elegance of an elder, and they run around, and they like there is a tunnel that is kind of like a vortex in itself, and they like to jump in that. Where they go or whatever. Well, this vortex they have here is pulling some of them in. So after a while, the elder says, well, I got to go round up the kids. So he comes here and waits until he gets them all together, and then because this thing is so inconstant, it takes a little help to help him get out of here. They had a really bad experience. These little mischief troublemakers got on this old man's trailer that he was living in by the marina out here on Eagle Mountain Lake, and they were jacking with his dog. And finally got tired of that, went out and shot one.
Mm-hmm.
And so then he disappeared. And so that got me involved. So I helped resolve that issue, and since then I've been on very friendly terms with these Mothmen.
Mhairead, you got to have some questions. You've been too quiet.
No, I'm just kicking back, listening in.
Okay.
Well, I've asked James a lot about them because I've been greatly intrigued by them for a long time, and I think it's that whole thing about when you look at the gargoyles on a church, the medieval gargoyles, you think, where did that image come from? Where did an artist didn't just dream that up? They must have seen something very similar in the real world. But that's where my sort of curiosity came from, and then I read the book about the Mothman, the famous one that the film was based on, but the film's nothing like the book. I know I'd probably be a bit scared if I saw one in the flesh, but I would love to see one. But something that's 8 foot tall when I'm not expecting it, with wings and a tail, I'd like to have warning beforehand. I think, there's just one around the corner, and I'd go and have a look and go, right, okay.
There's something to see. I think they're elegant myself. Now, the kids are, they don't mean harm or anything. They just, I think of kittens. If you ever watch kittens play, that's kind of like they are. Now, they're just full of energy, and they don't know what to do with it. I can't deal with them. I couldn't deal with them. I don't even want to be around them. But now the elders are suave. They're really neat. At first I thought these were their pets. Insulted one on that score.
James, have you had telepathic contact with Mothman?
Not so much empathetic, which is feelings. I mean, you can do so much more with an empathetic language than you can with verbal language. But, of course, I got to come into two worlds. It's hard to describe, to actually be in between dimensions, but they can draw you in and deal with you. They want to communicate with you. And that's the only way that you can communicate with one. But, of course, you have to be trusting. You have to, if this happens, you have to be trusting. I will say this, the elders have a penchant for women.
Really?
Yes. The old legends about that are true.
Oh, so is that where the whole kind of succubus thing comes from, maybe?
No, not succubus, but I think that the Scandinavian pan type thing does.
Oh, really?
Yeah, really.
Oh.
I think.
That's interesting.
Of course, who knows? I mean, these writers take legend or whatever, and they turn it and twist it into so many different things. And, of course, it's kind of funny the way it comes out. But, yeah, I think, of course, they don't rape women or anything like that. They're just fascinated with women because they don't have women.
What?
The male produces the child, too.
Oh, so it's kind of is the Mothman androgynous?
You could say that.
Interesting.
So where do they come from? They're not of Earth, are they?
No. They're not limited to time and space. They live in a rift. Of course, this means they have to travel around because every time that anywhere a continuum is fixed, that rift's going. It's kind of like partial manifestation. That's why these things have such a penchant to want to travel. But in the last period of time, ET communities have worked together to provide Mothman with a fixed rift or situation where they don't have to move quite so frequently or just disappear. It's because they're harmless, they're not combative. They have a tendency to want to warn people of what they see as an inevitability. John Keel had incorporated that in his book. Now, not the movie, but that these were trying to warn people of an impending disaster.
James, you said the Mothman wasn't limited by time and space.
No.
Are you limited by time and space?
I have the ability to compress time for my own use, to determine the truth of historical events in the past.
Have you compressed our future?
No.
Is that something you can do?
I've never tried to do it. It's not moral.
Not moral in the sense that some things should go unseen because of what reason?
Bias, the way that you have an unavoidable tendency to try to shape things to your liking.
So if you were to compress time and look exactly at our future, then it might affect you in such a way that you were no longer open-minded? Is that what you're saying?
No, that I might affect an outcome into the future.
Right.
In compressing time, and I've taught adepts this, you imagine that time is a spiral, and like a spring, and that if you compress that spiral down, you can enter at any point as an observer and watch events at that particular point.
So you've been able to do that to our past, but you choose not to do that for our future.
Exactly. How it might affect my behavior while I'm here to alter something that's going to happen in the future, you know, it's something I just wouldn't do. Now, if I am a removed party, I might, or have. If I'm totally removed, if I'm not living here and concerned about people that I care about, things, it's different. See, I have two parts, a part that's disassociated and removed, and a part that's here with you now.
Well, that kind of sounds like to me that you're kind of struggling with something.
Yeah, I am.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? No. So part of you is disassociated with this time and space, almost like an observer?
It can be, but of course the connection that I have with that part is still compelling enough that I have to draw a line about what I do here and what I do there too. I
want to leave?
Oh yeah, I do. I have a tug on me at all times from the EMVs that trying to pull me back. It takes a lot of strength to stay.
And you stay because you feel like you're doing a job, correct?
Well, I think I was rash during the first 6 extinctions, and I'm trying to make up for it this time.
You were rash in the sense that you left too early and you just gave up on him?
I was the instrument for the extinctions, ultimately, when it came to a point where the Earth was a place no one would want to live. That is my standard, and it's been reached almost here, but I'm trying to, that's why I take a stand. That's why I say things over and over again, and I hate to hear myself say things over and over again, the same things, but I do. I'm humbled. I'm not the pompous asshole that I was before.
During this last extinction 37,000 years ago, were you part of the elite?
No, I've never been part of the elite. I have been a soothsayer or a dream interpreter. I've sat among them, but I've always despised them.
Okay.
They all have the same flaws. It's like inbreeding. And, they would have you believe that is just wonderful, that should give them some right. It makes them less.
But you almost sounded like you had some guilt during the last destruction, you had played some kind of negative role to a degree. Is that true?
Well, I had the EMVs leave the sun.
Oh, so you finally said, okay, this is it. We're pulling the plug, so to speak.
Yeah.
So this time around, you've waited longer than you did before.
Yeah. I mean, here, the way that things are worse now than they've ever been as far as the Earth is concerned. That's why the Earth will not be left to ever go through this again. It'll be made into a star.
Do you foresee that happening then?
If you don't overthrow these monsters and go on a new path, consult with ETs that have already conferred with your leaders and say, yeah, we're going to do this, we're going to stop nuke, no more nuclear energy, we're going to stop weaponizing everything under our control, we're going to stop trying to reinstall absolutism, we're going to stop sacrificing children, become human, become what you should be, what you were designed to be. And then this plan will be cleaned up for you. You will be given an opportunity to develop to a point where you secure being part of the extended community yourself. And along with that goes what you can't imagine.
How well do you know individuals in the extended community?
I have a relationship of a liaison between the EMVs and them. With a few, I'm friendly, and with most of them, they consider me an obstacle.
Are there any members of the extended community that are willing to communicate with typical or normal Earth people like myself?
They have tried. They have brought nothing but unhappiness to those people. I know of one in particular. When they actually do meet with them and show them their capabilities to win their confidence, then immediately here comes the MIBs or worse. These people are hounded. In one case, the ETs, to demonstrate to this party, this individual, that they were the real thing, they dematerialized an automobile and then rematerialized it somewhere else. And he took pictures. And he took pictures of them, their probes, different aspects. And then here come the MIBs, and they took all of his negatives. They took all the prints that he had made. But he had given a set of prints to a friend of his that they didn't know about. So after getting his wits back, he told his friend, we need to do something about this. And here come these idiots saying, oh, well, we are policemen from an agency 6,000 years in the future and all this BS, and stirred the pot. And each time they would leave him, after preemptively coming into his presence, he would have less and less memory of what happened. And over a period of some 20 years, and this is typical. This is typical of what happens to these people. And, of course, the Air Force has trained Blue Delta that go in and do even worse things. All of this has happened, so they know they can't go to the common man. They've gone to officials. President Eisenhower conferred with them, and different ones. And they said, well, the EBs are problematical. They cause you nothing but grief. Let us get rid of them. And the military said, well, will you give us technology? And they said, no, we'll get rid of the EBs. And they said, well, no, we'll keep our EBs. We get technology from them. And it's done us a lot of good, hasn't it?
There is a member of the UFO community that's behind the disclosure movement. And I wonder, do you know what's really going on there?
Co-option.
So, to me, the whole disclosure thing seems a little bogus.
Yeah. Co-option.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on by what you mean by co-option?
Same thing that happened to MUFON. People get bought off. People are in leadership roles that shouldn't be. Whenever this group you're talking about first started, I got in contact with one of the people and said, I can tell you about a place in Utah you need to go to. They weren't interested, never got back with me. And so that was my first indication that they weren't sincere.
Yeah, they don't seem interested in anything that's real.
They have never challenged SETI. And they know, people on the inside know SETI has received intelligible messages.
I heard that once from a fellow that worked at Wright-Patterson.
It's true.
He was really freaked out about it, too. I mean, he was very uncomfortable. He didn't want to talk about it too much, but he did.
That's why the crop circles are there for everybody to see, you see. And every genuine crop circle is a little piece of puzzle.
So you think some of these crop circles are real?
Yeah. Yeah, most of them are. Most of them are real.
So what do you think about the efforts of the UFO community that, say, the past 20 or 30 years? Have we made it?
The people that get recognition and the spokespeople like Stan Friedman are those that are safe and will be gatekeepers. The publishers will publish their work, their books. If I wrote a book, it wouldn't be published. If I wrote articles or whatever, they wouldn't get, I wrote some articles and they're obscured. The only way you'll find them is if you have the link. If you go to the people that publish the articles, you can't find them through their search engine. I know I recently had to do that because a lady had heard me use the phrase spiritual technology and it struck a chord in her. So I had written these 2 companion articles for this particular online UFO publisher. And when I went on there, I can find them with their search engine. What I had to do was go back and in the search engine write my name with respect to them. And then I found links to the articles, but I couldn't go through their website to find them. So I call that obscured.
Does spiritual technology include things like telekinesis and telepathy?
No, these are things that all humans with unified consciousness have access to. You have access to collective consciousness and to genetic knowledge. And you only have those things working in you every once in a while whenever the conscious mind will let the subconscious in a little bit. But when you got a war that's going on between the subconscious and the conscious mind because of split consciousness, all of this is at odds with each other. It's like a divided house. And I think that in books like the Bible, where they speak of being one, that what they're talking about is unified consciousness.
Is there some kind of exercise that we can do to integrate our consciousness?
I have tried. I had 2 students that I worked with for years. One of them became an excellent poet. She's an astounding poet. The other guy betrayed Dr. Berggren and me both, and I had to out him. He was working with images that Dr. Berggren was getting after he had retired. And he set Dr. Berggren up. And when I found out that he was doing this behind Dr. Berggren's back, I outed him. And as a consequence, of course, it made me even look bad because I'd introduced him to Dr. Berggren. But nonetheless, he had lost the faith or whatever. I don't know that he ever had it. He had been an ex-Mason, and he was a former Canadian bureaucrat, petty bureaucrat. So, what do you expect? He says undertone. I mentioned that in a biography, a short biography that I wrote at the request of Mel Fabregas when he decided to have me on for a guest, which I know that he regrets now.
Why did he regret it?
I don't want to say anything that is derogatory about Mel Fabregas. I'm disappointed in him, that's all I'll say. But he's slighted me a couple of times. The disagreement is over Judy Wood.
Oh.
He has bought her conclusions, lock, stock, and barrel.
Yeah.
Blindly. Yeah. And, of course, I present another way of looking at it that falls back on the work of Dmitry Kulesov. And, of course, he won't examine that. He is kind of devoted to her, and there are people that are. If you remember what Red Ice went through whenever they questioned Judy Wood.
What happened?
A little hit artist that is part of her team actually got very nasty with him, the guy that has Red Ice. And so he came out on him and wrote a very eloquent rebuttal. Judy Wood is a gatekeeper. She is keeping people from actually penetrating into who was responsible for 911. She'll openly say that, well, I'm not interested in who did it. I just want to show how it was done. Well, she doesn't show how it was done. She talks about scalar weapons or energy-beamed weapons without any kind of explanation of the one biggest anomaly associated with that, the biggest contradiction, and that is that with all those other tall buildings around, how could this such a weapon be delivered except from above? And if it were, why was the uppermost floors of both the Trade Center buildings left intact? They fell intact.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
So there's your rebuttal right there. Of course, people like Mel Fabregas and other people that are sold on Judy Wood, maybe because her leanings towards Zionism, would buy that, and she throws people off of the track of finding out who did it, how they did it, and why they did it. But there's enough clues out there to formulate a knowledgeable opinion.
How can we integrate our consciousness then? Is there an exercise we can do?
I don't want you to. I want to see you survive with what you got because you're capable of such brilliant work. Creativity, the intensity, if that intensity can be tamed, where we can rule out the aberrancy that we see, the Vatican's pedophiles, Satanists, all this, get rid of all these monsters who become monsters for different reasons. I don't know that they're born that way, but I think that people are born with innate goodness. I've known so many people that I treasure, so many things that I will miss so much. The capability and everything. The universe lives and thrives on variation. And it doesn't put anything down without testing it out thoroughly. So if you can survive this split consciousness, this would be something new for the universe. You're the only people, I hate to say anything as sweeping and as broad as this, but as far as I know, and I travel quite a bit, you're the only people in the universe with split consciousness.
So is split consciousness more intense than the unified consciousness?
You are capable of such incredible feeling, moral outrage, so many wonderful things that are lost to those that have been over the hump for so long they've grown complacent. You are like, remember when the Europeans first discovered the Indians, the American Indians, they were enthralled with them, and there came about a myth called the noblesse sauvage, which was very popular in France. And I think the one thing that may have helped that along is that the Indians bathed and the Europeans didn't, which might have made the Indians a little more presentable.
Are these shows that we're doing, James, are they more for people in the future than for the people right now?
That is an incredible question. I never expected anyone to ever ask that. Well, if you don't serve as anything more than a teaching aid, which I know is what you're getting at.
Right.
If you don't, still, you have an immortal soul. The only thing that'll be different between you and anyone else in spirit form is that you won't remember this. You won't remember this sad episode. Those people from the former extinctions, they're in chambers in EMVs as spirits. They don't remember a failed experiment. They shouldn't. They're filled with the visions and experiences of all the other spirits in those chambers and made into something just incredible. And they add, in part, to the way in which all these wonders are facilitated and done. Because what you would call, what the Bible would call creation is going on all the time.
What I was thinking that maybe these shows that we're doing now will be viewed in the future when people are a little more open to this information. Is that?
Well, I don't think that they're likely going to be anytime soon. Soon in the context of eons, that there's going to be likely to be any occurrence of anything like you guys. You are a product of a fluke that no one could have foreseen, even the most astute.
When you say we are the product of a fluke, do you mean the entire population of the Earth right now?
Yeah. You had unified consciousness until you started coming to Earth, migrating from Mars, which is where you were for 50,000 years. And you screwed things up there. And so you had to come to Earth, and of course Earth was savage at the time, and it had to be tamed. And there were people that were living below the crust of Mars that helped you. You had come into this system on the moon. That was your vehicle on the way to this 300 light-year trip to deep space where you were going to colonize a series of planets in another binary system. When your system went kaput, you were halfway there. And so knowing that if anything happened, that you didn't have the support from your home planet, that are planets, that you might better look for something closer that wasn't 150 light years away, which is how far you were from your ultimate destination. So what you decided to do, you got in touch with these people that live underneath the surface of Mars, and they said, you're welcome here. And after 50,000 years, you screwed things up there, and so they helped tame Earth for you and put the moon, instead of orbit around Mars, put it around Earth. Well, in order for this moon of inconstant mass and disproportionate for it to be an ideal moon or satellite around Earth, they had to erect these machines inside the moon and these engines inside Earth. And then these people aspired to spiritual technology, thinking that you could figure out the rest for yourself. Well, in the meantime, during this migration, which took a long time, a caste system developed on Earth for some reason, and saw that by not making the final adjustments to these machines and engines, that something was happening, that it was giving a control advantage to these elite, although it was happening to them too. And that's where the split in the consciousness came from. I think if we are to attribute the Tower of Babel story to any real source, I think this might be it. Because these things hang on. And after every extinction, there are halls of records that are left. And, they're found. The powers that be always hide them, suppress them, destroy them. And that's what happened recently in the Basegi Mountains. They found a hall of records from the last extinction with a lot of gold and with some technology that you don't have.
Where are these Basegi Mountains?
Romania.
Who found this hall of records?
I'm not sure who found it lately. It might have been spelunkers that were looking for this cave that my great uncle had written about that he found.
So after the Earth becomes a sun, the spirits associated with the people here on Earth will be moved into chambers within these EMVs?
They'll be freed. Their mind and soul will combine, and they'll be freed, and they'll go where they want until they get cold, and then they'll go into a star, and more than likely, whatever star they choose to go into will have EMVs around it, or eventually they'll go into a star that does. But they will feel, in the vicinity of an EMV, they will feel this pull. The way I have communicating with EMVs, they'll feel this pull. And they'll eventually, as they try to define this pull, they'll be able to communicate and know that there are other spirits in these chambers. And they reach the energy level that they can access an EMV, they may go in. Eventually, it seems that all do. But it's choice. There's always free choice. It's not imprisonment, and they can leave, although few do. In my experience, when I was in an EMV, over a long, long period of time, I only saw a few ever leave. And, of course, I would try to find out why they were leaving, but, of course, they treat me like I don't exist, the way you spirits are.
Mhairead, have we covered any new ground? To me, it seems like new ground, but you're more familiar with James's information than I am.
I think there was something that James said that I don't think he said before on a show, which was about how he felt about the other extinctions. I don't think I've heard you say that before, James. You felt you were too quick.
Yeah.
I think that's new. I mean, we've talked a lot in private, so...
It's not something for me to easily talk about.
No, I know. So I think it's quite amazing that you've said that.
So when spirits leave bodies and they enter into space, they feel cold, you mentioned.
Eventually, everything requires energy, and spirits are no different. A spirit can obtain and hold enough energy to destroy a planet. They never do. And they never do any harm. I think that what we call ghosts are residues of anticipation that are left from a very bad experience more than they are any entity. We know, and there are certain people that draw this out. That's why when these ghost hunters go into homes, unless they have one of these people with them, and they're usually connected to the particular psychic phenomena associated with a ghost. And in most cases, most of these horrific events that are associated with ghosts are the poltergeist phenomena, and most researchers know that that is linked to a young girl who's coming into puberty. Her psychic energy is so strong and so powerful, it verges on psychic hysteria. Not all of them, but some of them, and they can do things. I know of one account where these people were sitting at a fireplace. This was in, I believe, Bavaria. They were sitting at a fireplace, and the fireplace was built not of stone but bricks. And this young girl was in the back of the room, and just directly opposite, between her and this brick that started sliding out of place, was her younger brother. And this brick pulled out, came to her through the coat, tail, or, it penetrated something substantial. Didn't hurt the boy, but it came through and ended up in her hand.
That's pretty interesting.
I'm trying to remember where I read that, but I never was able to research and prove it out or anything. That's one of the things that's always difficult. But I've heard other accounts. If you are in a house where things start flying around, doors slamming, this sort of thing, check and see if there's a young girl, 12 to 14 years old, around.
Are you able, James, to look into people's past lives?
I don't invade people. I mean, I have been associated with the powers that be in the past and, never tell them about my potentials, that I would be abused if I did. I could interpret dreams, which were sometimes, I didn't specifically want to, but I did. I did what I could to try to affect trends towards greater wisdom. Sometimes it worked out, sometimes it didn't. Saving people's lives, curing them of illnesses, it never works out. It never works out.
It never works out?
No.
It just leads them to more trouble and trauma?
I was asked, my mother-in-law, my last wife, was in the hospital dying. She had a mass on a lung that she didn't have the strength to survive it. And my wife, who had seen me do some things, looked at me and said, can you save her? And I said, yeah. She says, will you? I said, you really want me to? So I did. When that woman, after I did, that woman opened her eyes and looked at me with the vilest hatred you can imagine.
Wow.
That's how it works out. When they resign to leaving and you interfere with that, you have... And, of course, after that, that woman didn't have any use for me at all.
She was ready to leave. She wanted to leave.
I think so. I did a bad thing. Of course, you know how that goes. But, you
can't interfere with that process, I don't think. I agree. I can imagine that, being under pressure to help someone in that way, and then you do that. Having watched what my mother was like, because she was 92 when she passed away, and she decided, I'm convinced that she decided she was ready to go, because it only took her about 5 days to go from being here, being frail, but she looked like someone who could maybe go on another year. But she decided she was tired, she'd had enough, and within a week she was gone.
Yeah, I've seen people resign themselves. Mm. My stepfather resigned himself, and I was holding one of his hands. My brother was holding his other hand, and I could feel when his spirit left. And it was an extraordinary experience. I'll never forget it. But he chose. He chose the day when my mother would receive the most benefits from General Dynamics, who he had worked for 35 years. And that's the day he died. And the last thing he said to my brother and me was, take care of your mother. Then he was gone.
How much time do you see the people of the earth have left, if you had to make an estimate?
2 years.
That short?
Yeah.
So what kind of chaos do you see happening in the next 2 years?
I see it getting so bad that I have the EMVs in Utah leave.
What kind of events can we see leading up to that point?
The mad, insane attempt to install this globalist corporate police state in earnest at all costs. Mm-hmm. What you see going on in Ukraine right now is just a tip of the iceberg of what they plan to do. I look at people like George Soros, and this animal has no pity, no concern. Every human being that I have known in my life has a soft spot for children. I can't imagine I have been fortunate enough to be removed from these monsters that exploit children and do all sorts of barbaric things with them. These are monsters, and they need to be removed from any authority or any power. And once a person is demonstrated that they are a threat to children, they need to be taken down and put in a situation where they can't harm any, now or any time in the future. If you made that the golden rule, everything would pretty well take care of itself. It all comes down, and this is what I say, if somebody says, well, why are you here? I say, I'm here for the children. This is why I say it, because the children are your canary in the coal mine.
Yeah.
Do you see events like people being sent off to FEMA camps or the collapse of the dollar within the next 2 years, potentially?
If it's going to happen at all, it's going to happen within the next year and a half. Those FEMA camps are there for a purpose. Those coffins are there for a purpose. These false flags have been done for a purpose. If you pull it all together, you see that what they do is that they have an incident, they create an incident, they poll its impact on the public, and then they decide on their next step. I think that they intended an incident at the London Olympics, and because people were talking about it and concerned about it and paying attention about it, that they pulled back. I think that they would have probably followed the Boston Massacre or Sandy Hook with more stringent matters, but they didn't sell. If they had sold, then they would have quickly facilitated something else. Now, the Ebola thing right here, they're picking on people that still have a fascination with doctors, that still think because they had 6 years of medical school or whatever, they should be worshipped like gods. These people they can take advantage of, like women that hate men voting for Miss Clinton. It's only people in the world that would. Even minorities that they are depending on, that the Democrat Party is trying to depend on, once they figure out and know anything about Hillary Clinton, they realize that creature is the last person on earth to be sincere about any concern for any minority.
Well, James, we've only got 4 minutes left on the stream, and I want you to have the opportunity to tell people about your website or anything else you wanted to kind of close with here. And Mhairead, if you have a website that you want to talk about too, that'd be great.
Well, my website, or our website, and it belongs to Mhairead as much as me. It belongs to Tors, it belongs to Shuni, it belongs to Crystal Clark. All of us are colleagues, we work together. Is emvsinfo.com. Did I say it right, Mhairead?
emvsinfo.blogspot.com.
Okay, I always need that. What would I do without the help I get?
But people will find it, and if you go into YouTube and Google James Horak and Crystal Clark recent interviews, you'll find a lot of archive material of work that they've done together and interviews that James has done. A lot of material there, as well as Crystal's blog, which is Drowning in Absurdity. I can never say that word. Because we live in an absurd world, and I can never say the word absurd. Sorry, Crystal. Yeah, that's her blog, but you can find her through our blog as well.
Mhairead, I still think you, at very least, need to write a book.
I should write a book about James. Then maybe it'll get published.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you, Mhairead is an excellent artist, and if people will go onto her website and look at her art, maybe they'd be interested in ordering a print. She's having prints of some of her work made up. She'll sell them. I'm sure that her prices will be very, very reasonable. But she has I'm a fan, and I promote her as best as I can, but take a look.
What's that website again, Mhairead?
I just got a new one, and which I still need to do a bit of work on, but it's live now, and it's www.selkiedreams, which is all one word, SELKIE Dreams, and it's .co.uk. So that's where my art and some of my writing will be on there as well in the near future. I should write a book about James.
I think you should. Somebody needs to write down his information and kind of accumulate it. I think it's going to be a pretty big book.
I know. That's why I'm laughing. I mean, it's a book that could never get to the end of it, so.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you, Mark. We really appreciate you, Mark.
Thank you, sir. We'll talk to you guys later. Have a good afternoon.
You too.
Bye.
Goodbye.